Chapter 2, The Early Renaissance. What an exciting time to be alive. Painters, sculptors, architects, and philosophers were buzzing with ideas. With help from wealthy families and the church, they created splendid projects. Let's meet three important artists from the early Renaissance. Brunelleschi loses. Before Filippo Brunelleschi devoted himself to architecture, he worked as a goldsmith. In 1401 CE, when the city council of Florence invited artisans to submit ideas for decorating the huge doors of religious buildings called the baptistry, Brunelleschi created a beautiful design. But his design didn't win. The winning design was submitted by Lorenzo Ghiberti. When Ghiberti found out that he'd won, he bragged, "I have surpassed everyone." The Florence City Council offered to allow Brunelleschi to work as Ghiberti's assistant. But Ghiberti flatly refused his help. This started a lifelong rivalry between the men. After losing the contest, Brunelleschi decided to explore his interest in architecture. In the spirit of the Renaissance, he looked back to classical times. Brunelleschi wins. As the years passed, Brunelleschi took what he learned from the ancient Romans and began to develop his own ideas about architecture. Brunelleschi, like other Renaissance artists, began to move away from the complex medieval style of architecture in favor of the balance and symmetry of ancient Greek and Roman architecture. He had previously traveled to Rome to study Roman ruins and had been inspired by the dome of the Pantheon. This inspiration came in handy when in 1418 CE, the Guild of Wool Merchants in Florence announced another competition. They wanted to find someone who could solve a difficult architectural problem: how to put a roof over a huge space. The space was over the middle of the cathedral in Florence. Work had begun on the cathedral 80 years before Brunelleschi was born, but it still wasn't finished. The plans called for a roof to be placed over the middle of the church, an area 136 feet wide. For years, the architects of Florence had been arguing about how to build this roof. Some people said it was impossible, but Brunelleschi approached the wool merchants and announced that he could do it. How? He had an idea for how to cover the space with a dome. When the guild members demanded to see his plans, Brunelleschi refused. He claimed they would steal his ideas. To illustrate this point, Brunelleschi brought an egg to a guild meeting. Imagine you're a guild member at this meeting. You hear Brunelleschi ask, "Can any one of you make this egg stand on its head without toppling?" No one replies. So Brunelleschi cracks the egg on the table and balances on its jagged top. One of your fellow guild members sneers, "We could have done that." But Brunelleschi responds, "That's precisely my point. If I tell you my plans to build the dome, you'll say you knew how to do it all along." In the end, the guild members chose Brunelleschi to undertake the project. But then they got cold feet. They thought he needed someone to help him, so they picked Brunelleschi's old rival, Ghiberti. Brunelleschi was angry. He knew Ghiberti had no idea how to build the dome, so Brunelleschi pretended to be sick. While he lay in bed, all work stopped. Finally, the guild members told him that Ghiberti could do nothing without him. From then on, Brunelleschi alone was in charge. Donatello, the sculptor. The greatest sculptor of the early Renaissance was known as Donatello. As a young man, Donatello helped Lorenzo Ghiberti decorate the doors of the baptistry in Florence. Later, he worked with Ghiberti's rival, Brunelleschi. It seemed that Donatello and Brunelleschi visited Rome together to study the ancient ruins. Donatello drew from these experiences when he created his well-known sculpture, St. George. On the rectangular base of the statue, Donatello carved a scene from the popular legend in which St. George battles a dragon. According to the legend, there was once a fierce dragon terrorizing a town. The people fed the dragon sheep, but the dragon demanded humans. The unlucky victims were chosen by lottery. When the daughter of the king was chosen, she went to meet her fate. But St. George arrived just in time to save the princess and slay the dragon. Before leaving the scene, St. George converted all the townspeople to Christianity. The standing figure of St. George that Donatello carved is a proud and confident warrior. His strong muscular form shows through his armor. His watchful eyes and his slightly turned stance make him seem ready for whatever challenges may come his way. In this strong, watchful warrior, the people of Florence must have seen the embodiment of their own spirit. Page 16, A Little Barrel. Alessandro de Mariano Filippi was his real name, but he was called Sandro Botticelli. Botticelli means little barrel in Italian. It is believed that the nickname was first applied to Botticelli's older brother, and when young Sandro went to live with him, people started calling him Botticelli too. While the nickname doesn't bring graceful images to mind, Botticelli's paintings are known for their grace, elegance, and beauty. Botticelli was born in Florence in 1455 CE. He was first apprenticed to a goldsmith and then later to a famous painter. In 1481 CE, he traveled to Rome, where he spent a year painting the walls of the Sistine Chapel. The Sistine Chapel is located in the Vatican, where the Pope, the head of the church, lives. Botticelli's most famous painting, The Birth of Venus, shows a scene from classical mythology. Botticelli painted Venus in a pose from an ancient Roman statue, then added his own touches, such as flowering hair and almost sad expression. The wind gods blow gentle breezes to move the goddess ashore. Botticelli was a favorite painter, a wealthy patron, Lorenzo de' Medici. Lorenzo and his family were one of the most influential banking families and art patrons. They supported artists like Botticelli financially so that they had time to create art. In return, the Medici family was admired for their contributions to the art world. However, Botticelli's association with the Medici family ended when the family left Florence after Lorenzo's death. Botticelli lost much of his financial support too. The monk Savonarola took charge of the city of Florence and became the most powerful person in the city. Savonarola did not approve of paintings like The Birth of Venus. Savonarola's sermons must have affected Botticelli deeply. He stopped painting scenes from classical mythology and turned his attention to religious themes. For example, instead of painting Venus, he painted Mary, the mother of Jesus, but he still painted her with grace and elegance. Page 18, The Power of Perspective. The architect Brunelleschi inspired Renaissance artists when he developed the mathematical rules for perspective, a way of showing depth on a flat surface. Brunelleschi observed that when we look at things, objects that are close look bigger, while those that are far away look smaller. He also observed that if you stand between two parallel lines that stretch into the distance, the lines appear to come closer together until they meet at the point on the horizon. When the lines come together, they seem to vanish, so this point is called the vanishing point. These mathematical rules or instructions on how to achieve a sense of perspective were published. Even today, artists use these rules to create a sense of depth and space in their work. When applied, these rules are a tool for directing the viewer's eyes to the most important subjects of a painting. This is in direct contrast to the art from the earlier times, such as Middle Ages, when depth and space were not highlighted. The Renaissance painter Raphael, in his painting The School of Athens, used the structure of the building and the pattern of the floor to create a sense of perspective.